Okay, hi everyone. So I'm Mellisa Calitz and I will be discussing my master's research, an assessment of Oxycarenus species, a sporadic pest on stone fruit. So my research will be supervised by Dr. Shelley Johnson and Dr. Mellisa Calitz. So there has been sporadic infestations of Oxycarenus species in stone fruit orchards. It is a small Heptarean insect belonging to the family Lechidae, and it's commonly known as the cotton seed bug or the dusky cotton bug. However, they have been called the fruit tree stink bug. So they have been reported as swarming, similar to another Lechidae, the grain chins bug that was previously discussed here in the Western Cape. And since the Western Cape produces over 90% of the country's stone fruit, it's important to investigate this. So this study was initiated to identify the species, understand their impact, and assess whether intervention is needed, since they are very poorly understood. So both the Oxycarenus species and the grain chins bug follow a similar shelter-seeking behavior, and they aggregate on the fruit. So they both are opportunistic based. So this means when their host plants are near orchards and their host plants get harvested or no longer available, they will move into the orchard and aggregate on the fruit. They differ, however, in their biology, coloration, shape, size, and their host preference. So the Oxycarenus prefers cotton and other malvaceous plants, where the grain chins bug prefers grains. So although the grain chins bug is actually does not cause damage to the fruit directly, they are a pest of phytosanitary concern. And whereas the Oxycarenus species have been reported to cause some damage, but the status remains unclear. So if we look at Oxycarenus species here in South Africa, there are 11 species, of which 3 are of agricultural concern. Firstly, Oxycarenus hyalinipennis, which is the first one. It has a global distribution and has been reported on stone fruit in Israel. Then secondly, we have Oxycarenus annulipes, which is more a local species and has a more limited distribution and can seem to only appear in the southern parts of Africa. And they also have been reported here in South Africa as causing damage to stone fruit. And then lastly, Oxycarenus maculatus, which also has a limited distribution, but they prefer a different host, Proteas, so which gives them the name the Protea seed bug. So this project will have 4 research objectives. First being species identification, so we want to determine which species is present and causing this damage, and we'll be identifying them morphologically and molecularly. Then secondly, we'll be gathering information to assess to which extent Oxycarenus might be considered a problem and to understand the possible risk it might pose to the industry. And we will doing this through interviewing farmers and industry members and speaking to the people. And then thirdly, we'll be determining their biology, life cycle, seasonal cycle, and host plants, since little is known about them, especially on stone fruit. And then finally, if needed, we'll explore some post-harvest mitigation treatments to reduce the damage or contamination and manage the pest on stone fruit or harvested fruit, So some preliminary data or results have been obtained. All samples collected thus far has been morphologically identified as Oxycarenus annulipes, which is the local species previously mentioned, and we use Sammy's key. However, one sample was previously sent in and it came back as Oxycarenus latus via molecular testing. Now, this might be due to the lack of Oxycarenus annulipes being in the genetic database, since it hasn't been sequenced. So therefore, there is a gap in the molecular work and we'll need more local sequencing. And so while we were collecting these samples and doing some some monitoring, it can be stated that Malva parviflora or better known as mallows, are a definitive host plants of these insects, since they breed on them, and the occurrence on stone fruits might most likely be incidental, since if mallows are nearby. So we will need a lot more data to confirm whether Oxycarenus species are in fact of concern, and therefore monitoring will be a critical part of this research. And then in future, also plan to expand the molecular work, since there is a gap in it, and then test treatment efficiencies and collaborate with more growers. But ultimately, the goal will be to stay ahead of this potential threat and protect the key industry. Some references, and then, yeah, thank you so much.